I've had the opportunity to be in church leadership for over 35 years. In that time, I've learned a lot of it by my own mistakes. And I hope in the next few minutes just to share some of the things that I've learned that I think are critical when it comes to leadership and communication. You'll get more of this when you take Isaac's issues in worship and creative arts ministry in the year or two to come. But for those of you that are already serving in church ministry, I think you'll find this to be helpful, and please tuck this stuff away. These are nuggets of wisdom that I've learned often the hard way. The first was the first thing I learned in my first ministry in a church, and that was to build staff friendships beyond your working relationships. It's really important that you build friendships with the other people on staff. I didn't do this in my first ministry, and when a difficulty came, we didn't stick together. So pursue friendships, go beyond the working relationships, have dinner together, fellowship, do things together to the best that you can to build a relationship just beyond the, hey, working together, we're in staff meeting an hour a week, but that's it. Strive to have friendships, mentorships, mentoring relationships in the church as well. Seek out the opinions of others. The temptation is when you're first out there is, hey man, I'm a Bible college graduate. I know a lot. And what you'll find out is actually you don't, and you're the young person and you need to learn some things. So seek out the opinions of others. So what this does is communicate that you're approachable, teachable, and humble. It creates an environment of open communication. A lot of times we're afraid to do this out of insecurity. We're the one with a Bible college degree, so we're supposed to have all the answers. And we're forgetting the fact that there are people that we're working with that have 20, 30 years of experience, well beyond ours. So listen and learn from them. Also, I believe that collaborative leadership is the model. It's a way to allow everyone to share in the wind rather than a top-down authoritarian approach to leadership. But see yourself as a coach, as a team member, and work together. Third, learn to be understanding of others. See things from other people's perspective. If you're in a multiple staff church, you've got people that have different focuses. They're preaching or children's ministry or missions. And you need to see things from their perspective, that the world doesn't revolve around you and your particular ministry. So be understanding, see the ministry and the church through the eyes of others. When there is a conflicting opinion or decision that has to be made, who wins? And I think one of the approaches is to understand, first of all, the authority structure of the church. And this may vary from church to church. Different churches have different traditions when it comes to the authority structure. Whatever that might be, identify what that is. What is the appropriate authority structure? And then address your complaint or your issue to the appropriate level. Oftentimes, this is where we get into trouble, where we go out of this chain of command. May not be the best word for this. This happened recently. A couple weeks ago, there was a high-level Navy commander that was fired because he sent an email out to lots of people instead of just going to the person directly above him. And he was soundly fired for it. Not so much maybe his email was spot on, but he went outside the chain of command at the appropriate levels of communication. So that just has to do with submitting to authority, understanding your place in the structure. And if you can't submit to authority, then I would encourage you just to leave quietly. I've seen too many churches where someone has gotten bent out of shape and they haven't left quietly. They've split the church. I knew of a church that split 3 times in 12 years, and every time was over this very issue. Usually every time it was a youth minister who gathered a following of people and thought they knew how to do church better and split the church. So if you can't submit to authority, then please leave and leave quietly. Look for win-win scenarios, otherwise everyone loses. So when there is a difference of opinion or approach or philosophy, try to work it out. Try to work out some way where everyone gets something. Everyone gets a win. That should be obvious. It doesn't always work that way in the church. Sometimes people will just play the authority card and say, that's it. It's my way or the highway. Strive to be the kind of person that looks for win-win situations. In communicating with people, ask questions and repeat the answers. This is where you go, oh, so what you're saying is, and then you repeat back to them what they said. So, for example, a volume complaint. One of the common things that you're going to get as a worship leader is a complaint from someone about the volume. And I want you to pause right now, this video, and ask yourself, what would I say to the person that says, I just couldn't stand it. It was so loud, I had to leave the auditorium, and I spent the service out in the lobby. Pause the video. What would you say to that? Well, one of the things that you can say when it comes to a volume complaint is to ask questions. So here's some questions you might ask. Is there one thing that seems too loud? Is it the drums? Is it the guitar? Are the instruments too loud? Did you have trouble hearing the vocals? And maybe it's just an issue with the mix that we can work with. Is the sound too boomy? Do we have it EQ'd wrong? Where are you sitting? Are you in back in a corner where the bass might be getting trapped? Are you underneath a balcony? Is it the tone? Is it piercing? Is it edgy? Well, that's an EQ issue that we could adjust. Is the sound too loud at a particular time in the service? Is the volume okay for the first few songs, but too loud for the rest of the song? Just ask questions. Try to get more specific with it. So that way you can do something about it. If it's just a general complaint, it's difficult to really address that, because it's not really an issue of just turn the volume down. There's so many things, as you know, that go into this perception of volume that simply turning down a knob doesn't do it for us. So that's just an example. When someone has a concern, ask questions. Try to get to the bottom of it. Years ago, I picked up this little tip, 3 P's of good communication. Good communication is preceded by prayer. So this is if you got to have a difficult conversation or say something that may not be received well, do this. Pray about it first. Then good communication follows protocol. That is, you're talking to the right person. You're in that chain of command, of authority, and you're not going over someone's head. You're not going to blindside someone with it. And it strives to be positive. It's always oriented towards finding solutions, not just being a critic. No one likes someone who's just a critic. I know the problem. Give me the solution. If you can be that kind of person who is a solution-oriented person, your leadership team will love you. Now, there are some examples of poor communication that I've seen in the church. Of course, gossip is the go-to thing. If we're upset, we just got to tell someone. We got to talk about it with someone who can't solve the problem, who is out of the loop, and it's only going to cause trouble. Sometimes people just like to stir the pot. They just like to we say let the sleeping dog lie. This person likes to kick the dog or poke the bear. They want to get things going. They just thrive on conflict and tension, and they're not happy unless that's happening. So avoid that. Avoid those type of people. Setting up camp or taking sides. This is when you, in a difference of opinion, you might gather into camps, and this is just deadly when it comes to a church context. So avoid that. Avoid taking sides. Be the peacemaker in that particular case. I hear people say, hey, it's easier to ask forgiveness than to ask permission. Please don't do that. Please don't do that. What that says is, I don't value you. I don't trust you. So I think I know more than you do. So I'm going to do what I want to do. It's a terrible thing to do. It will destroy trust. I know it's hard to ask permission when the answer might be no, but do it. Do it. Dropping the email bomb. Yeah. Hopefully you don't do this, where you're upset and you just send an email to everyone. And I would just say, in general, be very careful with email. Know that email is permanent and it can be shared with anyone. So be very careful. We'll talk more about that in a bit. Negative, harsh, judgmental attitudes. I've seen that, unfortunately, in the church. Is there people that just, whatever has happened to them, they're wounded in some way, they're just angry, and nothing seems to please them. So don't give in to that. Don't become one of those people. Now, when it comes to communication, we have several options these days at our disposal. We can communicate via social media, and this has its advantages. It can reach a lot of people very quickly, but certainly you don't want to put anything on there that's super, personal or critical, negative, because that also is forever, and it can be shared, and it is so brief. Most issues are complex, and they can't be solved in a couple sentences on a social media post. Text is an option that a lot of us use because it's a very quick short way to communicate with people. And there's the expectation with a text that you respond quickly, like immediately. Like it's almost like I'm face to face, just shoot me back an answer. So there's that expectation. So if you get a text from someone, the expectation is you answer that as soon as possible. Email, I would say, doesn't quite have that same urgency, and but it still should be answered within 24 hours. Okay. Of course, you're aware of the CC, a carbon copy, referring to the old way that they used to copy paper. But carbon copy means it goes to everyone that you put their address in there. That's a good idea if you want someone to be in the loop, in the know. It doesn't mean that they're directly involved in the situation or event, but if you want them to be aware of it, you CC them, you copy them in it. A BCC means it's a blind carbon copy. It means that the other addressees cannot be seen. So sometimes people will BCC things to themselves, so they have their own private copy of it. A printed letter, of course, is the most formal means of communication that's appropriate for formal occasions, but rarely, in many ways, rarely used these days. A phone conversation, of course, is a great way to communicate more information without having the time constraints of a text. I mean, the thing, if it looks like a texting conversation is going into a couple minutes, I'm ready to pick up the phone at that point. There's some things and so always ask yourself, is this going to be easier by text or by phone? And in terms of how much time it's going to take, sometimes a phone conversation can be better. Of course, face-to-face is a fantastic way to communicate because you get the nonverbal communication. You get tone of voice, you get expression, you get that give and take. People tend to be much more gracious with one another face-to-face than they might be in an email or printed letter or even a text. So understand the purpose of your conversation and employ one of these appropriate communication tools. Something else I've learned is it's very important to have a detailed job description. So as you go out and get employment in a church, make sure everything's spelled out very clearly because we often have unspoken expectations that we bring with us. We always do. We always have unspoken expectations. So get that stuff on paper, get it in writing as an objective document, and then review it every year because your job description will change. Invariably, you'll find out that you're good at this thing, and so you get asked to do it quite a bit, and all of a sudden your whole job has shifted. Make sure your job description reflects that and has changed every year. Also, you want to have some mechanism for setting vision, establishing measurable goals, defining some kind of accountability structure where you'd have a yearly evaluation and action plan just to keep you on task and to keep you accountable. Some good leadership's habit I found is number one, to document everything. Your conversations, of course, your email, you're keeping, your calendar, all those kinds of things. Particularly when I say conversation, not every conversation, but certainly the important conversations. If you've had an important conversation, even take notes from that or write a summary of it, put an email to the person that you've talked to and say, hey, now this is what we talked about, right? That's an example of documenting over communicating. Track your work hours. Now, the reason I do this is to avoid two negative things. One would be to underwork. One of the criticisms ministers get is, hey, you guys don't work enough. You only work one day a week, right? Well, if you document that, you can say, no, actually, I work 60 hours this week. Okay. So the other thing you want to do this on is just to make sure you're not overworking. You're not putting in too much time and taking that away from yourself and from your family in an unhealthy way. So I found it helpful to document, including my hours spent on things. And then another good habit is to delegate whenever possible. This allows you to focus on what you're good at. Focus on your gifting. If you're not good at something, delegate it. Give it to someone else. And I don't mean, just because it's unpleasant, you don't want to do it, but give someone else the opportunity to serve in that way. And this is going to develop other leaders along the way. It's good team building habits. When it comes to recruitment, what you're looking for, and this is a whole PowerPoint in itself, but you're looking for people of good character, people who have interest, they're motivated, and they have an aptitude, they have the skill for it. Or another way of talking about that is you've got to have the 3 C's, the character, competency, that ability to do something, and the chemistry. You've got to have the right relational skills to work with other people. And then you want to support your team as well. You want to make sure that they are trained, that They've got some kind of written documents, curriculum, depending on the context, if it's a production team member or something, and then provide them with the tools that they need to support them, and then nurture them, pastor them, express your appreciation. The last thing I want to say is at some point in the life cycle of a ministry, sometimes you feel a question of whether I should stay. I've been at this church for X number of years. Should I stay? Should I leave? First, pray for guidance. Just take that privately to God first and ask God in the season, are you calling me somewhere else to do something else? Seek wise counsel. Go to a trusted mentors. I have made these decisions 3 times in my life, and every time I went to trusted mentors, and they served me well. Consider stepping down for a period of time. Maybe it's just some rest. Maybe you need a sabbatical. Maybe you just need a change of pace, not necessarily location. So consider that. If you do decide that God is calling you somewhere else, my encouragement is to resolve disagreements before you leave to the best of your ability. You don't want to leave burning bridges and with everything on fire. I found that if you just run away from problems, you're going to be running all your life. You're going to run into the same problems, and if your answer is to run away, that's not a solution. So do your best to deal with whatever issues might be part of the situation there. You may still have to leave, but do your best, if it depends on you, to be at peace with all people, and don't burn the bridges behind you. You may need to go back at some point.